The oncologist's words echoed in the sterile examination room as I sat on the paper-covered table, still trying to process what Dr. Martinez had just told me. Emma, the tumor has grown significantly since your last scan. We need to schedule surgery within the next 2 weeks, ideally sooner. This type of sarcoma can spread rapidly if we don't act quickly. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the examination table. At 28, I'd been battling this rare form of soft tissue cancer for 8 months, through chemotherapy that had left me weak and nauseous, through endless hospital visits that had drained my savings and my spirit. Now, facing major surgery to remove the tumor from my abdomen, I felt more alone than ever. Dr. Martinez, what exactly does the surgery involve? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. It's a complex procedure that will take approximately 6 hours. We'll need to remove the tumor and potentially some surrounding tissue to ensure we get clean margins. You'll be in the hospital for at least a week, and recovery will take several months. I won't lie to you, Emma. This is serious surgery, but it's your best chance for a full recovery. I nodded, absorbing the gravity of the situation. When can we schedule it? Dr. Martinez consulted her calendar. I have an opening next Friday, October 15th. I know it's short notice, but given the tumor's growth rate, I strongly recommend we proceed as soon as possible. October 15th. The date hit me like a physical blow. That was the day of my younger sister Madison's wedding, the elaborate destination ceremony in Napa Valley that my parents had been planning and financing for over a year. Dr. Martinez, is there any way we could schedule this for the following week? I asked desperately. She shook her head with professional sympathy. Emma, I understand this might conflict with other plans, but we're talking about your life here. The tumor has grown 30% since your last scan 6 weeks ago. Delaying surgery even a few days could be the difference between a successful outcome and, well, I wouldn't recommend it. That evening, I sat in my small apartment staring at my phone, trying to figure out how to tell my family. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was facing the most frightening medical procedure of my life on the same day that Madison would be celebrating the happiest day of hers. My parents, Robert and Linda Morrison, had invested everything in Madison's wedding. Dad had taken out a second mortgage on their house to pay for the Napa Valley venue, the designer dress, the elaborate reception for 200 guests. Mom had spent the last year coordinating every detail, from imported flowers to a celebrity wedding planner. Madison, 3 years younger than me, had always been the golden child, the one who got perfect grades without trying, who married her college sweetheart after a fairy tale romance, who seemed to glide through life without ever facing serious challenges. While I had struggled through graduate school working 2 jobs to pay tuition, Madison had sailed through her marketing degree with our parents covering every expense. I finally called my mother at 9 o'clock, after rehearsing the conversation in my head dozens of times. Emma, honey, what's wrong? Mom answered, immediately detecting the tension in my voice. Mom, I just met with Dr. Martinez. The tumor has grown, and I need surgery. Major surgery. There was silence on the other end of the line. When? She asked quietly. Next Friday, October 15th. Another long silence. Emma, that's Madison's wedding day. I know, Mom. Believe me, I know. But Dr. Martinez says we can't wait. The cancer is spreading, and if we don't operate immediately, I could. Well, the prognosis gets much worse. Couldn't you schedule it for the following week? Surely the doctor could accommodate that? I felt tears starting to form in my eyes. I asked her that exact question. She said waiting even a few more days could be dangerous. Mom, this is life or death. Oh, Emma. I could hear the conflict in her mother's voice. This is such terrible timing. Madison's wedding, we've put everything into this day. The deposits, the planning, the guests flying in from around the country. I understand that, but I'm your daughter too. I'm scared, Mom. I need you there with me. Of course, of course. Let me talk to your father and Madison. Maybe we can figure something out. But even as she said the words, I could hear the hesitation in her voice. The wedding had consumed our family's attention and resources for over a year. Madison had become increasingly demanding and dramatic as the date approached, treating every minor detail as a potential catastrophe. 2 hours later, Dad called me back. His voice was strained, carefully measured. Emma, your mother and I have been discussing this situation. We've also talked to Madison, and she's very upset about the timing. Dad, I didn't choose to have cancer. I didn't choose when the surgery had to be scheduled. I know that, sweetheart, but we've invested over $80,000 in this wedding. We have family flying in from all over the country. Madison has been planning this day since she was a little girl. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you seriously telling me that money and a party are more important than my cancer surgery? It's not that simple, Emma. This surgery, you'll be unconscious, right? It's not like you'll even know if we're there or not. But if we miss Madison's wedding, we can never get that day back. The words hit me like a slap across the face. I'll be unconscious, so it doesn't matter if my family is there to support me? That's not what I meant, Dad said quickly. What I'm saying is that we can be there for you during your recovery. We can visit you in the hospital the day after the wedding. But Madison's wedding day happens once. And my cancer surgery happens once too, Dad. This is the surgery that determines whether I live or die. Don't be so dramatic, Emma. You've been fighting this cancer for months. One more day won't make a difference. But I knew he was wrong. Dr. Martinez had been clear about the urgency, about the tumor's aggressive growth pattern. This wasn't about convenience or scheduling conflicts. This was about my survival. So what are you telling me? I asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it said explicitly. We're telling you that we can't miss Madison's wedding. We'll be there for you as soon as we get back from Napa. It's just one day, Emma. I hung up the phone and cried harder than I had since my initial cancer diagnosis. My parents had made their choice, and it wasn't me. The next morning, Madison called me. I almost didn't answer, but I hoped maybe she would be different, maybe she would understand the gravity of the situation. Emma, I heard about your surgery, Madison said, her voice carrying that familiar edge of annoyance. I can't believe you're doing this to me. Doing what to you? Having major surgery on my wedding day. Do you have any idea how this makes me feel? It's like you're trying to upstage my wedding with your medical drama. I was speechless. Madison, I have cancer. I didn't choose when to have surgery. Couldn't you have scheduled it for a different day? This is the most important day of my life. And now everyone's going to be worried about you instead of celebrating with me. I'm sorry my life-threatening illness is inconvenient for your party. Don't be sarcastic with me, Emma. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're trying to ruin my wedding day. Mom and Dad have spent their entire savings on this wedding, and now you want them to miss it for your surgery? I want my family there when I might be dying, yes. You're not dying, Emma. Stop being so dramatic. You've had cancer for months, and you're still here. One more day won't kill you. Madison, the doctor said. I don't care what the doctor said. This is my wedding day, and I'm not letting you ruin it with your crisis. Mom and Dad are staying here, where they belong. She hung up, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. Over the next few days, other family members called to express their sympathy and their regret that they couldn't be there for my surgery. My Aunt Sarah, Dad's sister, was particularly outraged. I can't believe Robert and Linda are choosing a party over their daughter's cancer surgery, she told me during a long phone conversation. I offered to change my flight and come to San Francisco to be with you instead of going to the wedding, but your mother begged me not to. She said it would quote family drama and quote Madison's feelings. My cousin Jake, who lived in Portland, also called to offer support. Emma, this is insane. I'm driving down to be with you during the surgery. Someone from the family should be there. Jake, you don't have to do that. It's a long drive and, don't argue with me. You're not going through this alone. His words brought me to tears. At least someone in my family understood what mattered. The day before my surgery, I sat in my apartment packing a bag for my hospital stay. My phone buzzed with text messages from family members who were already in Napa Valley for Madison's wedding festivities. Pictures of wine tastings, rehearsal dinners, and pre-wedding celebrations filled my social media feeds. Mom texted me, "Thinking of you, sweetheart. We'll call you as soon as we can tomorrow. You're going to do great." The casual tone infuriated me, as if I was having a minor procedure rather than major abdominal surgery to remove a potentially fatal tumor. That evening, Dr. Martinez called to check on me and review the surgical procedure one final time. Emma, how are you feeling about tomorrow? Terrified, I admitted. That's completely normal. Is your family planning to be there? My cousin is driving down from Portland. My parents, they had a prior commitment. There was a pause. I see. Well, I want you to know that you have an excellent surgical team, and we're going to take very good care of you. Dr. Martinez, can I ask you something honestly? If this were your daughter, would you miss her surgery for any reason? Another pause. Emma, I wouldn't miss my daughter's surgery for anything in the world. The morning of October 15th, I arrived at UCSF Medical Center at 6 a.m. for pre-surgical preparation. Jake had driven through the night and met me at the hospital, looking exhausted but determined to be there. How are you holding up? He asked as we sat in the pre-op waiting area. I keep thinking they'll change their minds and show up, I admitted. That maybe they'll realize a wedding isn't more important than their daughter's life. Jake shook his head. Emma, you have to stop waiting for them to do the right thing. Focus on yourself and getting through this surgery. As the nurses prepared me for surgery, I watched other patients being surrounded by worried families, spouses holding hands, parents kissing their children goodbye before procedures. The contrast with my own situation was heartbreaking. Any family members you'd like us to call with updates? The surgical nurse asked. Just my cousin Jake. He'll be in the waiting room. No parents or siblings? They're at a wedding. The nurse's expression shifted slightly, but she maintained her professional demeanor. Well, we'll take excellent care of you. At noon, exactly when Madison's ceremony was supposed to begin in Napa Valley, I was wheeled into the operating room. As the anesthesia took effect, my last conscious thought was wondering if my parents were thinking about me at all. The surgery took 7 hours, longer than expected because the tumor had grown into surrounding muscle tissue. Dr. Martinez had to remove more tissue than originally planned, but she was confident that they had achieved clean margins and removed all visible cancer. I woke up in the recovery room at 9 p.m., groggy and in significant pain. Jake was there immediately, holding my hand. Hey, you did it, he said softly. The surgery went well. Dr. Martinez said they got everything. My parents? They called the hospital around 4 o'clock to check on your status. The nurse told them you were still in surgery. 4 o'clock. Right around the time Madison would have been cutting the cake at her reception. Over the next week in the hospital, I received a steady stream of visitors. Friends from work, college roommates, neighbors from my apartment building. But not my parents or Madison. Mom called every day to check on my progress, always mentioning how beautiful the wedding had been, how happy Madison looked, how perfect everything turned out. She seemed genuinely confused by my cool responses to her calls. Emma, you seem upset with us, she said during one particularly strained conversation. I am upset, Mom. I went through major cancer surgery alone because you chose Madison's party over my life. It wasn't just a party, Emma. It was your sister's wedding day, something we've been planning for over a year. And I've been battling cancer for 8 months. But apparently that doesn't rate the same level of priority. You're being unfair. We called the hospital. We checked on you. You called the hospital. You didn't visit me. You didn't hold my hand when I was scared. You didn't talk to my doctors. You called from your hotel room in Napa Valley. The conversation ended with Mom promising they would visit as soon as they returned from their mini vacation extending the wedding weekend. They finally visited me 5 days after my surgery, bringing flowers and taking pictures to post on social media showing what caring parents they were. The gesture felt hollow and performative. You look good, sweetheart, Dad said, clearly uncomfortable with the hospital setting and my obvious pain. The doctors say the surgery was successful, I replied. They think they got all the cancer. That's wonderful news, Mom exclaimed. See? Everything worked out fine. Madison didn't visit at all during my week-long hospital stay. She was too busy with her honeymoon in the Mediterranean, posting pictures of beaches and romantic dinners, while I struggled with surgical recovery and the lingering effects of months of chemotherapy. 3 months later, I received the news I'd been praying for. The pathology reports showed clear margins, and my follow-up scans showed no evidence of remaining cancer. I was officially in remission. Mafmao, I celebrated quietly with Jake and a few close friends. My parents sent a congratulatory text message. The emotional distance between my parents and me continued to grow over the following year. They seemed to expect that I would get over their absence during my surgery, treating it as a minor family disagreement, rather than a fundamental betrayal of trust. Madison, now settled into married life, occasionally reached out with superficial attempts at sisterly connection. But she had never acknowledged the conflict between her wedding and my surgery, never apologized for her cruel words about my medical drama. 18 months after my surgery, I was living in Portland near Jake, having relocated for a new job in environmental consulting. The distance from my family felt healthy and necessary. I was building a new life focused on my career, my health, and relationships with people who had proven they cared about me. That's when I received the phone call that changed everything. "Emma, it's Mom. I need to tell you something, and I don't know how to say this gently." The fear in her voice immediately put me on alert. "What's wrong?" "It's Madison. She's been having some health problems, and the doctors think she might have cancer." The irony was so sharp it took my breath away. "What kind of cancer?" "They're not sure yet. She found a lump in her breast last month, and the biopsy results came back suspicious. She needs more tests, possibly surgery." I felt a complex mixture of emotions, genuine concern for Madison's health, alongside anger at the cosmic unfairness of the situation, and a small, shameful part of me that wondered if my parents would finally understand what I had gone through. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mom. What can I do to help?" "Well, that's why I'm calling. Madison is scared, and she wants family support. We were hoping you could come home for her appointments and procedures." The request was staggering in its lack of self-awareness. "You want me to provide the family support for Madison that you didn't provide for me?" "Emma, that's different. Your surgery was scheduled, and we had prior commitments. Madison's situation is sudden and frightening." "My cancer was sudden and frightening too, Mom, but you decided Madison's wedding was more important than my life. Please don't make this about old grievances. Madison needs her family now, and I needed my family 18 months ago, but you chose a party instead." The conversation ended badly, with Mom accusing me of being vindictive, and me pointing out the hypocrisy of their sudden understanding of family priorities. Over the next several weeks, I received increasingly desperate calls from my parents as Madison's medical situation worsened. The initial biopsy had confirmed aggressive breast cancer, and she needed immediate chemotherapy followed by surgery. "Emma, please," Dad pleaded during one particularly emotional call. "Madison is asking for you specifically. She realizes now how frightened you must have been, and she wants to apologize." "She's had 18 months to apologize, Dad. Why does it take her own cancer diagnosis for her to understand what I went through?" "Because she's young and she made mistakes. Please don't punish her for our poor judgment." The distinction was important to me. I wasn't angry at Madison for having cancer. I was angry at all of them for their complete lack of empathy during my own medical crisis. But ultimately, my conscience wouldn't let me abandon Madison the way they had abandoned me. I flew home to San Francisco for her first chemotherapy session, determined to be the family member I had needed during my own cancer treatment. Madison looked smaller and more vulnerable than I had ever seen her. The confident, demanding princess who had refused to let my surgery upstage her wedding was gone, replaced by a frightened young woman facing her own mortality. "Emma," she said when she saw me enter the chemotherapy suite, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what I said about your surgery, for not understanding what you were going through. Madison, let's focus on getting you through this treatment. We can talk about everything else later." But as I sat with her during the 6-hour chemotherapy infusion, watching her struggle with nausea and fear, I felt the anger I'd been carrying for 18 months begin to soften. Not because I forgave the past, but because I understood that holding on to resentment would only poison my own healing. Over the following months, I flew home every few weeks to support Madison through her treatment. I helped her research treatment options, accompanied her to doctor appointments, and held her hand during the difficult procedures I remembered so well. My parents were grateful for my support, but they seemed unable to grasp the parallel between Madison's current situation and my own experience 18 months earlier. "You're such a good sister," Mom said after one particularly difficult day at the hospital. "Madison is so lucky to have you." "I would have been lucky to have family support during my own treatment," I replied. "Emma, we've apologized for that. Can't you let it go?" "You've never actually apologized, Mom. You've explained why you made the choice you made, but you've never acknowledged that it was wrong." The conversation I'd been waiting for finally came 6 months into Madison's treatment. We were sitting in her apartment after a chemotherapy session, and she was feeling well enough for a serious discussion. Emma, I need to tell you something that I've been thinking about throughout this whole treatment process. What's that? When I was getting married, I was so focused on having the perfect day that I couldn't see anything else. When you told me about your surgery, all I could think about was how it might affect my wedding. I didn't think about you as my sister who was scared and facing cancer. I know, Madison. But going through this myself, having cancer, needing surgery, I can't imagine facing it without family support. When Mom and Dad are there holding my hand, when you fly across the country to sit with me during chemo, it makes all the difference. I realize now that we abandoned you when you needed us most. It was the acknowledgement I had been waiting for, but it also highlighted how my parents still didn't seem to understand the magnitude of their choice. Madison, I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge what happened. I want to do something to make it right, but I don't know how. You don't need to make it right. You need to focus on getting better. But maybe when this is all over, we can rebuild our relationship based on actually understanding and supporting each other. Madison's treatment was successful. The chemotherapy shrank her tumor significantly, and her surgery went smoothly. She recovered quickly and returned to work within 3 months. But the experience had changed our family dynamics permanently. Madison and I developed a closer relationship based on shared understanding of medical trauma and the importance of family support. She became an advocate for cancer patients and started volunteering with support organizations. My relationship with my parents remained strained. They continued to minimize their choice to attend the wedding instead of my surgery, treating it as an unfortunate scheduling conflict rather than a fundamental failure of parental priorities. The final confrontation came during Christmas dinner 2 years after my surgery. Mom was telling the extended family about Madison's recovery and how proud she was of how everyone had rallied around her during treatment. It just shows how important family support is during medical crises, Mom said, oblivious to the irony of her statement. Yes, it does, I replied. It's unfortunate I didn't have that support during my own cancer treatment. The dinner table went silent. Uncle Mark, who had been at Madison's wedding, looked uncomfortable. Emma, we've been through this, Dad said. We couldn't be in 2 places at once. You chose to be at a party instead of a hospital, Dad. Let's call it what it was. Madison's wedding wasn't just a party. It was a once-in-a-lifetime event. And my cancer surgery wasn't a once-in-a-lifetime event. The surgery that determined whether I lived or died? Madison, to her credit, spoke up. Mom, Dad, Emma's right. What you did was wrong. I was so focused on my perfect day that I couldn't see past my own wants. And you enabled that selfishness. Emma faced cancer surgery alone because we prioritized a celebration over her life. The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. For the first time, my parents acknowledged that they had made the wrong choice, that they had failed me when I needed them most. We can't undo what we did, Mom said, crying, but we want to try to rebuild our relationship with you. It's going to take time, I replied. And it's going to require you understanding that some choices have permanent consequences. 3 years after my surgery, I married David, a fellow cancer survivor I had met through a support group. Our wedding was small and intimate, 25 people who had proven their love and support through difficult times. My parents attended, but they weren't part of the planning process. Madison served as my maid of honor, having earned that role through her presence during the difficult years following our respective cancer diagnoses. During my wedding reception, Madison gave a speech that addressed our family's journey. Emma and I both learned that life can change in an instant, that health is precious, and that the people who show up during your darkest moments are the ones who matter most. Emma showed up for me when I was facing cancer, even though our family hadn't shown up for her. She taught me what real love and forgiveness look like. 5 years after my surgery, I remained cancer-free and had built a fulfilling life in Portland with David. We started a nonprofit organization that provided support services for cancer patients whose families couldn't or wouldn't provide adequate emotional and practical assistance. Too many people face medical crises alone, I explained during our organization's first fundraiser. Everyone deserves to have someone hold their hand during the scariest moments of their lives. The organization grew quickly, providing services for hundreds of cancer patients who lacked family support. Many of our clients were people whose families had made choices similar to my parents, prioritizing other commitments over medical crises. My relationship with Madison continued to strengthen. She had used her cancer experience as motivation to become a nurse practitioner specializing in oncology. We talked regularly and supported each other through the ongoing challenges of cancer survivorship. My relationship with my parents improved slowly. They made efforts to be more present and supportive, but the fundamental trust had been broken. Some wounds heal, but they leave permanent scars. The real validation came when Mom called me 7 years after my surgery to tell me about a conversation she'd had with another mother at her book club. This woman was telling us about her daughter's upcoming surgery and how she was worried about missing her son's graduation party to be at the hospital, Mom said. I found myself telling her that she should absolutely be with her daughter, that graduation parties happen every year, but medical crises are unique moments when family support matters most. What did you tell her about your own experience? There was a long pause. I told her about missing your surgery for Madison's wedding. I told her it was the worst decision I ever made, and that I've regretted it every day since. How did she respond? She said she couldn't imagine choosing a party over her child's surgery. She said it helped her understand what really mattered. It wasn't the apology I had originally wanted, but it was acknowledgement that my parents finally understood the magnitude of their choice. They had learned from their mistake, even if it had taken years, and Madison's own cancer diagnosis to teach them. The karma my family experienced wasn't malicious cosmic revenge. It was the natural consequence of choices that revealed character and priorities. Madison's cancer forced all of us to confront what really mattered and what kind of support we wanted to provide for each other. Looking back, I realized that the most important lesson wasn't about forgiveness or family dynamics. It was about understanding that people show you who they are through their actions during crisis moments, and believing them when they do. My parents had shown me that they valued appearances and social obligations more than my life. Madison had shown me that she was capable of growth and genuine empathy when forced to confront her own vulnerability. And I had shown myself that I could survive betrayal, build a meaningful life despite family dysfunction, and choose to help others facing similar challenges. The story that began with my family choosing a wedding over my cancer surgery ended with all of us understanding the true cost of that choice. Some lessons can only be learned through pain, and some relationships can only be rebuilt on foundations of hard-earned wisdom. The karma wasn't about punishment, it was about education. And sometimes, that's the most powerful justice of all. 10 years after my surgery, I stood before a packed auditorium at the National Cancer Institute's annual conference, delivering a keynote address about family support systems during medical crises. My nonprofit, Hands Held Foundation, had grown from a small Portland-based organization into a national network serving over 5,000 cancer patients annually. The data is clear, I told the assembled oncologists, social workers, and patient advocates. Cancer patients with strong family support systems have significantly better treatment outcomes, lower rates of depression, and higher 5-year survival rates. But what happens when family support isn't available, either due to geographic distance, estrangement, or simple failure to prioritize medical needs over social obligations? In the audience, I spotted Dr. Martinez, my surgeon, who had become a close friend and advisor to the foundation. She nodded encouragingly as I continued. Our research shows that approximately 30% of cancer patients experience some form of family abandonment during treatment. Parents who can't miss work, spouses who prioritize other commitments, siblings who find medical situations too uncomfortable to handle. These patients face not only the physical trauma of cancer, but the emotional devastation of realizing their families won't support them during their most vulnerable moments. The presentation included case studies from our program participants, anonymized stories that illustrated the profound impact of family choices during medical crises. One case study, though I didn't identify it as such, was my own experience with parents who chose a wedding over surgery. After my presentation, a young woman approached me during the reception. She looked nervous, but determined. "Ms. Morrison," she said, "I wanted to thank you for starting this foundation. I'm Sarah Chen, and I've been volunteering with your Seattle chapter for 2 years. Sarah, thank you for your service. What drew you to volunteer with us?" My brother had leukemia when I was in college. My parents were going through a bitter divorce at the time, and they were so focused on their legal battle that they basically ignored his treatment. I ended up dropping out of school to care for him because no one else would. Sarah's story was heartbreakingly familiar. "How is your brother now?" He's doing well. Been in remission for 8 years. But the experience taught me that some people need surrogate family members during medical crises. Your organization provides that. And your parents? Sarah's expression hardened slightly. They're still trying to understand why my brother and I have limited contact with them. They think we're being dramatic about something that happened years ago. Some people never develop the capacity for genuine accountability, I replied. But you and your brother found a way to support each other, which is what matters most. That evening, I called Madison from my hotel room in Washington, D.C. Our weekly conversations had become a constant in both our lives, a way of maintaining the sisterly relationship we had rebuilt through shared understanding of medical trauma. "How did the presentation go?" Madison asked. "Really well. The audience was engaged, and we had over 40 new organizations express interest in partnership agreements. I saw the live stream of your opening. When you talked about families prioritizing social obligations over medical needs, I thought about Mom and Dad. Do you think they were watching?" "I doubt it. But even if they were, I think they've heard this message enough times by now." Madison was quiet for a moment. "Emma, can I ask you something that I've been thinking about?" "Of course. Do you think you would have started the foundation if our family had supported you properly during your surgery? Like, did their betrayal actually lead to something more meaningful than what might have happened otherwise?" It was a question I'd pondered many times over the years. I don't know. I might have become a successful environmental consultant who happened to be a cancer survivor. Instead, I became someone whose life mission is ensuring other people don't face medical crises alone. So in a weird way, their terrible choice led to something that's helped thousands of people. Maybe. But that doesn't excuse what they did. And it doesn't mean the outcome justifies the pain they caused. I know. I guess I'm trying to understand if there's some cosmic purpose to the whole thing. Madison had become increasingly philosophical since her own cancer experience. She was now pursuing a master's degree in counseling psychology, planning to specialize in medical trauma and family systems therapy. The next morning, I received an unexpected phone call that would test everything our family had learned about priorities and support. "Emma, it's Dad. I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how you're going to take this news." His voice carried the same fearful tone Mom had used when telling me about Madison's cancer diagnosis. "What's wrong, Dad?" "It's your mother. She's been having some neurological symptoms, memory problems, confusion, difficulty with coordination. The doctors think it might be early-onset Alzheimer's disease." The news hit me like a physical blow. Mom was only 64, and Alzheimer's was a devastating diagnosis for anyone, but particularly cruel for someone so young. What exactly are her symptoms? She's been forgetting recent conversations, getting lost in familiar places, having trouble managing her finances. We initially thought it was stress or depression, but the cognitive tests suggest something more serious. What do the doctors recommend? More testing to confirm the diagnosis, and then, well, there's no cure, just medications that might slow the progression. I felt a familiar, complex mixture of emotions, genuine concern for Mom's health, alongside the complicated feelings I still carried about our relationship. "Dad, what can I do to help?" "Well, that's what I wanted to discuss with you. The doctors say family support is crucial for Alzheimer's patients, especially in the early stages. Madison has offered to help, but she's in her residency program and can't take extended time off. I was wondering if you might consider moving back to San Francisco, at least temporarily." The request was staggering in its lack of self-awareness. Once again, my parents were asking me to provide the family support they had denied me during my own medical crisis. "Dad, do you understand what you're asking me? I'm asking my daughter to help care for her mother during a devastating illness. You're asking me to give up my life and career to provide the kind of support you refused to give me during my cancer treatment." There was a long silence. "Emma, that was different. Your surgery was one day. This could be years of caregiving. My cancer treatment was 8 months of chemotherapy followed by major surgery and months of recovery. But you're right that this is different. It's a progressive illness that will require long-term family commitment. So will you consider moving back? I'll consider how I can help. But I'm not uprooting my life to become Mom's primary caregiver. You'll need to explore other options." The The conversation ended with Dad, clearly disappointed by my response. Within hours, Madison called to discuss the situation. Emma, Dad told me about his conversation with you. I understand why you're hesitant to move back. Do you think I'm being vindictive? No, I think you're being realistic. You have a life in Portland, a husband, a career, a foundation that depends on your leadership. It's not reasonable to expect you to abandon all of that. But I do want to help Mom. This is different from their choice to skip my surgery. Mom has a degenerative disease that she didn't choose. What if we developed a care plan that involves all of us contributing without anyone sacrificing their entire life? Madison's suggestion led to a family meeting where we developed a comprehensive care strategy for Mom's illness. I would visit monthly for extended weekends, handling medical appointments, and coordinating care services. Madison would provide support during her residency breaks and vacation time. Dad would handle day-to-day care with assistance from professional services. Most importantly, we established clear boundaries about what each family member could and couldn't provide, based on our respective circumstances and capabilities. The arrangement worked well for the first year. Mom's progression was slower than initially feared, and the combination of family support and professional care allowed her to maintain relative independence. But the real test came when Mom had a serious fall that resulted in a broken hip and hospitalization. The injury occurred during a week when Madison was taking board exams and couldn't leave her residency program. Dad called me at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Emma, your mother fell last night. She's in the hospital and she's going to need surgery to repair her hip. When is the surgery scheduled? This afternoon. The doctors say it's urgent because of her age and the Alzheimer's. The longer they wait, the higher the risk of complications. I checked my calendar. I was supposed to give a presentation to potential foundation donors that afternoon, a meeting that had been scheduled for months and could determine funding for our next fiscal year. Dad, I can catch the next flight out. I'll be there this evening. But what about her surgery? She'll be scared and confused. She needs family there. The parallel to my own surgical experience was impossible to ignore. Mom would be facing surgery while frightened and confused, just as I had been 10 years earlier. Dad, you'll be there for her surgery. I'll arrive in time to be there for her recovery. But what if something goes wrong during the procedure? What if this is the last time she's lucid enough to recognize us? His words echoed my own fears from a decade earlier, but I had learned something important about boundaries and realistic expectations. Dad, you'll be there to hold her hand and talk to her before surgery. That's what matters most. I can't control whether something goes wrong during the procedure, but I can be there for her recovery and ongoing care. I rescheduled my donor presentation and flew to San Francisco that afternoon, arriving at the hospital just as Mom was being moved from surgery to recovery. The operation had been successful, but she was groggy and confused from the anesthesia and pain medication. Emma? She said when she saw me, her voice weak and uncertain. When did you get here? Just now, Mom. How are you feeling? Confused, my hip hurts, and I can't remember why I'm in the hospital. I spent the next 3 days helping Dad navigate Mom's recovery process, coordinating with physical therapists, social workers, and discharge planners. The experience was emotionally difficult, but also healing in unexpected ways. Emma, Mom said during one of her more lucid moments, I want to tell you something while I still can express myself clearly. What's that, Mom? I know we made terrible choices when you had cancer. We prioritized the wrong things, and we failed you when you needed us most. Mom, we've talked about this before, but I want to make sure you understand something. Watching you care for me now, seeing how you've built your foundation to help other people, I realize that you became the person I should have been when you were sick. Her words brought tears to my eyes. Mom, you don't need to. Yes, I do. You're showing me what unconditional love looks like, what family support should be. I'm grateful, and I'm sorry it took me so long to understand. Mom's cognitive decline accelerated after her hip surgery. Within 6 months, she required full-time care in a memory facility. Dad struggled with the decision but eventually accepted that professional care was necessary for her safety and well-being. Madison and I took turns visiting Mom regularly, even though she increasingly didn't recognize us. The visits were more for our benefit than hers, a way of maintaining connection and processing our grief over losing her mind before losing her body. It's strange, Madison said during one of our joint visits. But I feel like Mom and I have had more honest conversations in the past year than we had in the previous 30. The Alzheimer's stripped away all the social pretenses and left just the essential emotions. She told me last week that she was proud of both of us, I replied. She might not remember our names, but she remembers feeling love and pride. Dad struggled more than anyone with Mom's illness. His guilt over their past choices, combined with the helplessness of watching her cognitive decline, left him depressed and isolated. I keep thinking about all the time we wasted being focused on the wrong things, he told me during one of our conversations. Your mother and I spent so much energy on appearances and social expectations that we missed what really mattered. Dad, you can't change the past. But you can choose how to spend whatever time you have left. I want to help with your foundation. I want to do something meaningful with the rest of my life. Dad's offer surprised me. What kind of help were you thinking about? I could share our story, what it's like to be the parent who made the wrong choice. Maybe other families could learn from our mistakes. The idea had merit. Our foundation's educational programs could benefit from the perspective of family members who had failed to provide support during medical crises. Dad, that would be valuable. But you'd need to be completely honest about your choices and their consequences. I'm ready to do that. If our mistakes can help other families make better decisions, then maybe something good can come from our failures. Dad began speaking at foundation workshops and conferences, sharing the story of choosing Madison's wedding over my surgery. His presentations were powerful because they came from genuine remorse and hard-earned wisdom. I want to tell you about the worst decision I ever made, he would begin his talks. 10 years ago, my daughter Emma needed major cancer surgery on the same day as my other daughter's wedding. We chose the wedding. Here's what that choice cost our family, and what I wish I had understood then. His willingness to be vulnerable and accountable helped dozens of families navigate similar conflicts. The workshop feedback consistently praised his honesty and the practical guidance he provided about prioritizing medical needs over social obligations. Mom passed away peacefully 3 years after her Alzheimer's diagnosis. The funeral was small and intimate, attended by people who had truly known and loved her, rather than the large social gathering she might have preferred in her earlier years. Madison gave a eulogy that captured Mom's evolution in her final years. Our mother spent most of her life focused on appearances and social expectations. But Alzheimer's stripped away everything except love. And in those final years, she showed us who she really was underneath all the pretenses. Dad spoke about the lessons Mom's illness had taught our family about priorities and presence. Linda's greatest gift to us wasn't the elaborate events she planned, or the social connections she maintained. It was teaching us, through her illness, what it means to show up for the people you love. I chose not to speak at the funeral, but I wrote a letter to Mom that I read privately at her gravesite. Dear Mom, you weren't perfect, and neither was our relationship. But you learned to acknowledge your mistakes and express genuine love. You showed me that people can change, that accountability is possible even late in life, and that love can coexist with honest acknowledgement of past failures. Thank you for trying to make things right, even when it was difficult. 5 years after Mom's death, the Hands Held Foundation had become one of the most respected patient advocacy organizations in the country. We operated programs in 47 states, had helped over 20,000 cancer patients, and had established research partnerships with major medical centers. But the most meaningful measure of our success wasn't statistical. It was the individual stories of people who had received support during their darkest moments. Emma, said Dr. Martinez during our foundation's 15th anniversary celebration, you've created something remarkable here. You've transformed personal pain into a force for healing that extends far beyond what any individual could accomplish. I had help, I replied, looking around the room at Madison, Dad, Jake, David, and the hundreds of volunteers and staff members who had built the foundation with me. And I had the example of what happens when families fail to support each other. Sometimes the best teacher is understanding what not to do. That evening, Madison and I sat on the hotel balcony overlooking the San Francisco Bay, reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mom and Dad had made a different choice 15 years ago? Madison asked. Sometimes, But I think everything that happened, their betrayal, your cancer, mom's Alzheimer's, dad's redemption journey, all of it was connected. Not in some mystical, predetermined way, but in the sense that each experience taught us lessons we needed to learn. What was the most important lesson? That the people who show up during your worst moments are showing you who they really are. And that you have to decide whether to forgive them, learn from them, or simply move forward without them. And what did you decide about our family? I decided that people can change, that accountability matters more than apology, and that love is complicated but still worth preserving when it's genuine. As I looked out at the lights reflecting on the bay, I thought about the 15-year journey from that devastating phone call about my surgery date to this celebration of lives saved and families reunited. The karma that had shaped our family's story wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about education and growth. Each crisis had forced us to confront our values and priorities, to decide what kind of people we wanted to be, and what kind of relationships we wanted to maintain. Mom and Dad had learned that appearances and social obligations were less important than supporting their children during medical crises. Madison had learned that empathy comes from shared vulnerability, not abstract understanding. I had learned that healing from betrayal requires both boundaries and forgiveness, that pain can be transformed into purpose, and that the most meaningful response to abandonment is ensuring that others don't face similar situations alone. The story that began with my family choosing a wedding over my cancer surgery had become a story about the possibility of redemption, the power of accountability, and the importance of showing up for the people you love. Not all families survive the kind of betrayal we experienced. Not all relationships can be rebuilt after fundamental trust has been broken. But sometimes, when people are willing to do the hard work of acknowledging their failures and changing their behavior, something new and stronger can emerge from the wreckage of what came before. The karma hadn't been instant or dramatic. It had been slow and educational, teaching each of us lessons we needed to learn about love, loyalty, and the choices that define who we really are. And in the end, that kind of karma, the kind that transforms people rather than simply punishing them, was the most powerful justice of all. 20 years after my surgery, I received a phone call that brought our family's story full circle in the most unexpected way. "Mrs. Morrison Chen," the voice on the other end said, "This is Dr. Jennifer Walsh from Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I'm calling about your niece, Sophie Madison Harris." Sophie was Madison's 8-year-old daughter, born 3 years after Madison had completed her cancer treatment. The mention of Children's Hospital immediately sent alarm bells through my mind. What's wrong with Sophie? She was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia yesterday. Her parents asked me to call you specifically because of your experience with cancer and your foundation's work. My heart sank. Sophie was Madison's only child, the bright, energetic little girl who had brought such joy to our healing family. The idea of her facing cancer at 8 years old was devastating. What's her prognosis? With aggressive treatment, childhood all has an excellent cure rate over 90%, but the treatment protocol is intensive. She'll need immediate chemotherapy, followed by 2 to 3 years of ongoing treatment. What can I do to help? Her parents specifically requested that I ask if your foundation provides services for families dealing with childhood cancer. They said they want Sophie to have every possible support system during treatment. Of course we do. I'll be on the next flight to Philadelphia. As I packed for the emergency trip, I thought about the cruel irony of our family facing another cancer diagnosis. But this time, the response would be completely different. This time, everyone would understand what mattered most. David drove me to the airport, his face reflecting the same mixture of grief and determination I felt. "How is Madison handling this?" he asked as we navigated through traffic. "I don't know yet. She's probably terrified, but trying to stay strong for Sophie. I can't imagine what it's like to watch your child face cancer. At least she won't have to face it alone. The whole family will rally around them this time." He was right. The family that had once prioritized a wedding over cancer surgery would never make that mistake again. I arrived at Children's Hospital that evening to find Madison and her husband James sitting in the pediatric oncology waiting room, looking exhausted and shell-shocked. Madison stood up when she saw me, and we embraced without words. "How is she?" I asked. "Scared, but trying to be brave," Madison replied. She doesn't really understand what's happening, just that she has to stay in the hospital and take medicine that makes her feel sick. And how are you? Madison's composure cracked slightly. Terrified. I know the statistics are good, but she's my baby, Emma. I can't bear the thought of her going through what we went through. James, who had been quiet during our exchange, spoke up. Emma, thank you for coming so quickly. Madison has been talking about you constantly since the diagnosis, about how strong you were during your treatment, about how the foundation helps families like ours. Your family, James. This is where I belong. We spent the next hour discussing Sophie's treatment plan with Dr. Walsh. The protocol was aggressive but straightforward. Intensive chemotherapy for the first 6 months, followed by maintenance therapy for 2 years. Sophie would be able to attend school during treatment, though she'd need to be careful about infections and would likely lose her hair. The most important factor in childhood cancer treatment is family stability and support, Dr. Walsh explained. Children who have strong family networks cope better with treatment and have better long-term outcomes. That evening, I finally got to see Sophie. She was sitting up in her hospital bed, looking small and fragile, but still recognizably the spirited little girl I knew. Her face lit up when she saw me. Aunt Emma. Mommy said you were coming to visit me in the hospital. Hi, sweetheart. How are you feeling? Tired, and my tummy hurts from the medicine, but the nurses are nice, and they have good TV shows here. Madison sat on the edge of Sophie's bed, stroking her daughter's hair with the gentle touch of a mother, trying to memorize every moment. Aunt Emma knows all about being sick like you are, Madison told Sophie. She got better, and so will you. Did you have to stay in the hospital too, Aunt Emma? I did. And it was scary sometimes, but the doctors and nurses took very good care of me, just like they're taking care of you. Will my hair fall out like yours did? It might, but it will grow back even prettier than before. And we can get you some beautiful hats and scarves to wear while it's growing. Sophie nodded solemnly, processing this information with a remarkable adaptability of children. Over the next several days, I coordinated with our Foundation's Philadelphia chapter to provide comprehensive support services for Madison's family. We arranged for meal delivery, transportation assistance, and emotional support counseling. Most importantly, we connected them with other families who had navigated childhood leukemia successfully. Dad flew in from San Francisco, having canceled a planned vacation without hesitation. The contrast with his behavior 20 years earlier was stark and meaningful. I won't make the same mistake twice, he told me as we sat in the hospital cafeteria. Sophie needs her grandfather here, and Madison needs her father. Dad, you don't have to prove anything anymore. You've shown through your work with the Foundation that you understand what matters. Maybe, but this is different. This is my granddaughter, and I want to be the grandfather I should have been during your treatment. His commitment was absolute. Dad rented an apartment near the hospital and stayed in Philadelphia for the first 3 months of Sophie's treatment, providing daily support that allowed Madison and James to maintain some work schedule and emotional stability. But the most remarkable response came from an unexpected source. Kyle and Derek, my former stepbrothers who I hadn't spoken to in years, both called to offer support. Emma, Kyle said during his call, I know we haven't talked since our family issues years ago, but Madison reached out to tell me about Sophie. I want to help however I can. That's thoughtful of you, Kyle, but what could you do from Arizona? My restaurant group has a location in Philadelphia. I can provide catered meals for the family, coordinate food for other families in the pediatric oncology unit, whatever would be helpful. Derek's offer was equally surprising. I've been working with children's charities through my financial consulting business. I can help Madison and James navigate the insurance paperwork and set up financial assistance programs to cover treatment costs. Both of my former stepbrothers had evolved into genuinely caring men who understood the importance of supporting families during medical crises. Their offers weren't attempts to reconnect with me personally. They were genuine expressions of compassion for a child facing cancer. I think we should accept their help, Madison told me when I discussed their offers with her. People change, and Sophie can benefit from all the support available. Kyle's restaurant provided daily meals for Sophie's family and 3 other families in the pediatric oncology unit. Derek helped Madison navigate complex insurance procedures and established a fund to cover travel and accommodation expenses for out-of-town family members. Their involvement created an unexpected but meaningful expansion of Sophie's support network, demonstrating how crisis could bring out the best in people who had previously failed to understand the importance of family solidarity. Sophie's treatment progressed well. The initial chemotherapy successfully induced remission, and her doctors were optimistic about her long-term prognosis. But the process was exhausting for everyone involved, particularly Madison, who was trying to balance her nursing career with being a full-time cancer parent. "I don't know how you did this alone," Madison told me during one of Sophie's difficult treatment days. "Having the whole family here, having your foundation's support, having friends bringing meals, I can barely manage even with all this help. You're not doing it alone, which makes all the difference. And Sophie is responding well to treatment, which I couldn't be sure about during my own experience. Do you think she'll remember much of this when she's older? She'll remember feeling loved and supported. She'll remember that everyone in her family showed up when she needed them most. That's worth more than any specific medical memory." 6 months into Sophie's treatment, she was well enough to attend a Hands Held Foundation fundraising gala in Philadelphia. Madison had insisted that Sophie come, saying she wanted her daughter to see the positive impact that could come from medical adversity. "This is the foundation that Aunt Emma started," Madison explained to Sophie as we walked through the gala reception. "She helps families like ours when someone is sick." Sophie, wearing a beautiful pink dress and a silk scarf covering her bald head, looked around at the assembled donors and volunteers with curiosity. "Are all these people sick like me?" "Some of them are, and some of them help people who are sick, and some of them give money so we can help more families." During my speech that evening, I shared Sophie's story as an example of how family support could transform the cancer experience. 20 years ago, when I faced cancer surgery, my family made choices that left me feeling abandoned during my most frightening moment. Today, my 8-year-old niece is facing childhood leukemia, and she is surrounded by a family that understands what presence and support really mean. The difference in our experiences illustrates how much families can learn and grow when they commit to prioritizing what truly matters. Sophie fell asleep during my speech, curled up in Madison's lap while surrounded by grandparents, aunts, and family friends who had all rearranged their lives to be present for her treatment. After the gala, Dr. Walsh approached me with an observation that had been forming throughout Sophie's treatment. "Emma, I've been practicing pediatric oncology for 15 years, and I've never seen a family respond to childhood cancer diagnosis with such immediate, comprehensive, and sustained support. It's remarkable. We learned from past mistakes," I replied. "Sometimes the most painful experiences teach the most important lessons." Would you consider developing a family education program based on your family's experience? Both the initial failure to provide support and the subsequent transformation. Other families could benefit from understanding both sides of the story. The suggestion led to the creation of our Family First program, which used our family's complete story, including the wedding versus surgery choice, to help other families understand the long-term consequences of prioritizing social obligations over medical needs. Dad became the primary spokesperson for the program, sharing his perspective as a parent who had made the wrong choice and learned from it. "I want to tell you about 2 different responses to family medical crises," he would begin his presentations. 20 years ago, we chose a wedding over our daughter's cancer surgery. 6 months ago, we chose our granddaughter's leukemia treatment over everything else. The difference in outcomes, both medical and relational, illustrates the power of family priorities. The program was incredibly effective because it presented the full spectrum of family responses to medical crisis, from failure to redemption, helping participants understand both the consequences of poor choices and the possibility of learning from mistakes. Sophie completed her intensive treatment phase successfully and transitioned to maintenance therapy with an excellent prognosis. Her hair began growing back in soft curls, and she returned to school with boundless energy and a sophisticated understanding of medical terminology that impressed her teachers. "I want to be a doctor when I grow up," Sophie announced during a family dinner, celebrating her 1-year treatment anniversary. "Like Dr. Walsh, so I can help other kids who are sick like I was." "That's a wonderful goal," I told her, "but you can help people in lots of different ways." The most important thing is finding work that feels meaningful to you. Like how you help families be together when someone is sick. Exactly like that. 2 years after Sophie's diagnosis, she achieved complete remission and transitioned off all treatment medications. The celebration party included everyone who had supported her family during treatment, medical staff, foundation volunteers, extended family members, and the new friends she had made in the pediatric oncology community. "I want to thank everyone who helped us during Sophie's treatment," Madison said during the party. "But I especially want to thank my sister Emma, who showed us what real family support looks like, and who built an organization that ensures other families don't have to face medical crises alone." Sophie, now 10 years old and healthy, stood up to give her own speech. "When I was sick, everyone in my family came to help me. My mom and dad stayed with me in the hospital. Grandpa moved to Philadelphia to take care of us. Aunt Emma's foundation helped us with lots of things. Even Kyle and Derek, who aren't really in our family anymore, sent food and helped with money stuff." She paused, looking around the room with the wisdom that sometimes comes from surviving difficult experiences at a young age. "I learned that when someone you love is sick, you show up. You don't make excuses or say you'll help later. You just come and stay until they're better." Her words perfectly captured the lesson our family had learned through 2 decades of medical crises, missed opportunities, and hard-won wisdom. As I looked around the room at the people who had rallied around Sophie, Madison, and James, Dad, Jake, David, Kyle, and Derek, medical staff, foundation volunteers, and the community of families we had met through the pediatric oncology program, I realized that Sophie had experienced something I had never known during my own cancer treatment: the absolute certainty that she was loved and supported by people who would prioritize her well-being over any other consideration. That night, as David and I flew back to Portland, I reflected on the 20-year journey from my family choosing a wedding over my surgery to 3 generations of family members learning to prioritize medical needs over social obligations. "Do you think Sophie will remember the details of her treatment when she's older?" David asked. "She'll remember feeling loved. She'll remember that when she needed her family most, everyone showed up. She'll understand that medical crises reveal who people really are, and that the people who matter most are the ones who stay. And she'll never have to wonder whether her family would choose a party over her life." No, she won't. That cycle ended with our generation. 3 years after Sophie's remission, I announced my retirement from active leadership of the Hands Held Foundation. At 53, I wanted to spend more time with David, to travel, and to pursue personal interests that had been delayed by decades of intensive nonprofit management. Madison was selected as the foundation's new executive director, bringing her nursing background, personal experience with both adult and childhood cancer, and deep understanding of family dynamics to the role. "I want to continue the work Emma started," Madison said during her installation ceremony, "but I also want to expand our focus to include preventative family education, helping families understand the importance of medical support before they face a crisis." Her vision included developing programs for schools, religious organizations, and community groups that would teach people about family priorities during medical emergencies before those emergencies occurred. "We've learned that the best time to establish family support systems is before you need them," Madison explained. "Families shouldn't have to learn about medical priorities through trial and error." The foundation continued to grow under Madison's leadership, eventually serving over 50,000 families annually and establishing international programs in 12 countries. Dad continued his speaking work until he was 81, sharing our family's story with audiences around the world. His presentations evolved to include not just the original wedding versus surgery choice, but the complete arc of family learning and growth that had followed. "The most important thing I can tell you," he would conclude his talks, "is that it's never too late to learn what really matters. But it's much better to understand family priorities before you're tested by medical crisis." On my 60th birthday, Sophie, now 17 and preparing for college with plans to study pre-med, gave me a gift that brought the entire journey full circle. "Aunt Emma," she said, presenting me with a handwritten letter, "I wrote this for my senior English project about influential people in my life. I wanted you to have the original." The letter described how my response to being abandoned during my own cancer treatment had created a foundation that supported her family during her childhood leukemia, and how that experience had shaped her understanding of family loyalty and career aspirations. Emma Morrison Chen taught me that the most painful experiences in life can become sources of strength and service for other people, Sophie had written. She showed me that when families fail you, you can choose to become the kind of person who ensures other people don't experience the same failure. Her life proves that the best response to abandonment is creating systems of support that prevent others from facing similar abandonment. The letter continued. Because of my aunt's example, I plan to become a pediatric oncologist who specializes in family support systems during childhood cancer treatment. I want to continue her work of ensuring that no child faces medical treatment without knowing they are completely loved and supported by their family. Reading Sophie's words, I realized that the karma that had shaped our family's story had completed its full cycle. The abandonment I had experienced during my cancer surgery had led to creating support systems that had carried Sophie through her own cancer treatment, which had inspired her to dedicate her life to supporting other families facing similar challenges. The story that had begun with my family choosing a wedding over my surgery had become a multi-generational commitment to ensuring that medical crises bring out the best in families rather than revealing their worst tendencies. Sometimes karma isn't about punishment or revenge, it's about transformation and learning. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals become the foundation for the most meaningful contributions. Sometimes families broken by poor choices can be rebuilt into something stronger and more purposeful than what existed before. Looking back on 30 years of medical crises, family conflicts, and hard-won reconciliation, I understood that the real karma had been educational rather than punitive. Each challenge had taught us lessons about love, loyalty, and the choices that define who we really are. The wedding my family had chosen over my surgery was a single day that ended decades ago, but the foundation built from their abandonment would continue serving families for generations to come, ensuring that the lessons we had learned through pain would prevent others from facing similar abandonment. In the end, that was the most powerful karma of all, transforming personal betrayal into collective healing, ensuring that future generations would benefit from the wisdom earned through our family's mistakes and redemption. 35 years after my surgery, I stood in the observation deck of Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, watching my now 28-year-old niece, Dr. Sophie Harris, lead her first family conference as a pediatric oncology fellow. Through the glass, I could see her sitting with the parents of a 6-year-old boy who had just been diagnosed with brain cancer. Sophie's patient, gentle demeanor reminded me so much of Dr. Martinez during my own cancer journey. But there was something else in Sophie's approach, an intuitive understanding of family dynamics and trauma that came from her own experience as a childhood cancer survivor. "Dr. Harris is remarkable," said Dr. Chen, the department head who had invited me to observe Sophie's work. "She has an almost supernatural ability to identify families who are struggling with internal conflicts during their child's treatment. It's like she can sense when family support systems are failing." I smiled, knowing exactly where that intuition came from. Sophie had grown up hearing the story of our family's evolution, understanding both the devastating consequences of abandonment during medical crisis and the healing power of genuine support. She started something called the Family Stability Protocol, Dr. Chen continued. When she identifies families at risk of fracturing during treatment, she implements immediate intervention strategies. Her success rate at maintaining family cohesion during childhood cancer treatment is unprecedented. Through the glass, I watched Sophie lean forward as the parents began arguing about treatment decisions. The mother wanted aggressive experimental treatment, while the father favored a more conservative approach. Their conflict was escalating, and their young son was absorbing every word. Sophie gently interrupted their argument. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I can see that you both love Michael deeply and want what's best for him. But right now, Michael needs to see his parents working together, not fighting about his care." She turned to their son. "Michael, would you like to show your mom and dad the puzzle you've been working on? I bet they'd love to help you finish it." As Michael eagerly pulled out his puzzle, Sophie continued speaking to his parents in a voice low enough that he couldn't hear. "Here's what I've learned from working with families facing childhood cancer. Children are incredibly resilient when they feel secure in their parents' love and unity, but they become anxious and withdrawn when they sense family conflict. The medical treatment is important, but family stability is equally crucial for recovery. The transformation was immediate. Both parents stopped arguing and focused on helping Michael with his puzzle, their shared love for their son overriding their disagreement about treatment protocols. How did she know to do that? Dr. Chen asked me. Experience, I replied. Not just medical experience, but lived experience with family trauma and healing. That evening, Sophie joined David and me for dinner at our hotel restaurant. She looked tired but satisfied, the way I remembered feeling after particularly meaningful days at the foundation. I heard you observed my family conference today, Sophie said as we settled into our booth. Dr. Chen wanted me to see your family stability protocol in action. I was impressed. I've been thinking about expanding the program, Sophie said, her eyes lighting up with the same passion I'd felt when developing foundation initiatives. Not just for childhood cancer, but for families facing any pediatric medical crisis. What would that look like? A comprehensive assessment tool that identifies family dysfunction patterns early in the treatment process, coupled with immediate intervention strategies. Social workers, family therapists, patient advocates, a whole team focused on maintaining family unity during medical trauma. David leaned forward. That sounds like it could revolutionize pediatric medicine. That's the goal. I've seen too many families fall apart during their child's treatment, not because of the medical outcome, but because they didn't know how to support each other through the crisis. Sophie's vision reminded me of my own early dreams for the Hands Held Foundation, but her approach was more sophisticated, informed by advances in family systems therapy and pediatric psychology that hadn't existed when I started my work. Have you talked to Madison about this? I asked. Actually, the foundation board approved seed funding for a pilot program. We're launching it here at CHOP next month, and if it's successful, we'll roll it out to our partner hospitals nationwide. The continuity was remarkable. The foundation I had started in response to family abandonment was now funding research into preventing family dissolution during pediatric medical crises, led by the little girl whose own cancer treatment had demonstrated the healing power of unified family support. 6 months later, the Family Stability Protocol pilot program was showing extraordinary results. Families enrolled in Sophie's intervention program had a 93% rate of maintaining stable relationships throughout their child's treatment, compared to a 71% rate for families receiving standard psychosocial support. The data is compelling, Sophie explained during her presentation to the American Academy of Pediatrics annual conference. But what's really remarkable is the qualitative feedback from families. Children in stable family systems report lower anxiety, better treatment compliance, and more optimistic outlooks. Parents report feeling more capable of supporting their child and each other. The presentation included video testimonials from families who had participated in the program. One mother spoke directly to the camera while her 10-year-old daughter, now in remission from leukemia, played quietly beside her. Dr. Harris saved our family, the mother said. When Lily was diagnosed, my husband and I started blaming each other for everything. Her symptoms, the delayed diagnosis, the treatment decisions. We were headed for divorce before Dr. Harris helped us understand that Lily needed us to work together, not fall apart. The father added his perspective. The program taught us that medical crisis doesn't have to destroy families. It can actually make them stronger if you have the right support and tools. Sophie's work was attracting national attention. Medical journals published her research. Pediatric hospitals requested training for their staff, and family advocacy organizations endorsed her protocols. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. At age 87, Dad had been invited to speak at the same pediatrics conference where Sophie presented her research. 35 years ago, my family faced a choice between my daughter's cancer surgery and my other daughter's wedding, Dad told the assembled physicians and researchers. We chose the wedding. Today, my granddaughter is pioneering research that helps families make better choices during medical crises. The difference between those two moments illustrates both the devastating consequences of family failure and the incredible potential for generational healing. He paused, looking directly at Sophie in the audience. My granddaughter's work exists because my generation failed, But her success proves that families can learn, grow, and ensure that future generations don't repeat the same mistakes. The standing ovation that followed Dad's speech lasted nearly 5 minutes. Sophie was crying, and so was I. That evening, 3 generations of our family gathered for dinner. Dad, Madison, Sophie, David, and me. The conversation naturally turned to the evolution of our understanding about family priorities and medical support. "I've been thinking about writing a book," Sophie announced. "Not just about the medical protocols, but about our family's complete story. The abandonment, the consequences, the learning process, the redemption, and how that journey led to helping other families." Madison nodded enthusiastically. "I think that could help people understand that family dysfunction isn't permanent. People can change, relationships can be rebuilt, and past failures can become sources of wisdom." "What would you call it?" I asked. Sophie smiled. "I was thinking, choosing what matters, how one family's mistakes became medicine for others." The title perfectly captured our journey from crisis to healing to service. 2 years later, Sophie's book became a bestseller, resonating with families across the country who were struggling with medical crises, relationship conflicts, and questions about priorities and loyalty. The book tour took her to dozens of cities, where she spoke to audiences about family resilience and the possibility of transforming pain into purpose. But the most significant impact of Sophie's work wasn't literary, it was practical. The Family Stability Protocol had been implemented in over 200 hospitals nationwide, directly serving thousands of families facing pediatric medical crises. "The program is saving more than just family relationships," reported Dr. Walsh, who had overseen the national implementation. "Children and families receiving stability interventions have measurably better treatment outcomes. Family unity directly correlates with medical recovery." The research was groundbreaking because it provided empirical evidence for something our family had learned through painful experience: that emotional support and family stability weren't just nice additions to medical treatment, they were essential components of healing. On my 70th birthday, the Hands Held Foundation organized a celebration that brought together people from every phase of our family's journey. Patients we had served, medical professionals we had worked with, family members who had learned and grown together, and hundreds of volunteers who had dedicated themselves to supporting families during medical crises. The keynote speaker was Dr. Michael Torres, my husband David's son from his first marriage, who had become a pediatric surgeon specializing in childhood cancer treatment. "I grew up watching Emma and David build support systems for families facing medical trauma," Michael told the assembled crowd. "Their work taught me that surgery is just one component of healing. The other components, love, presence, stability, hope, are equally important for recovery." He continued, "Today I operate on children whose families are supported by protocols that Sophie developed, based on lessons learned from Emma's experience of family abandonment. It's a perfect circle. Personal trauma transformed into institutional healing that benefits thousands of children and families." But the moment that moved me most came when Sophie's former patient, Michael Thompson, the little boy whose parents had been arguing during that family conference I'd observed years earlier, took the stage. Now 15 years old and cancer-free for 7 years, Michael spoke with the poise and wisdom that sometimes comes from surviving serious illness as a child. "Dr. Sophie saved my life, but not in the way you might think," Michael said. "She saved my family first, and that's what gave me the strength to fight cancer. When kids are sick, they need medicine, but they also need to know their family is solid and united. Dr. Sophie makes sure families stay together, which makes kids like me believe we can get better." As I listened to Michael speak, I thought about the extraordinary journey that had brought us to this moment. The abandonment I had experienced during my cancer surgery had created ripple effects that were still expanding 35 years later, touching lives in ways I could never have imagined. The family that had once chosen a wedding over surgery had evolved into a multi-generational commitment to ensuring that other families understood what really mattered during medical crises. The foundation I had started in response to betrayal had become a comprehensive support system serving families across the country. The little girl who had been surrounded by love during her own cancer treatment had become a doctor dedicated to preserving family unity during pediatric medical trauma. After the celebration, Sophie and I walked through the hospital where she had received her childhood cancer treatment, now renovated and expanded, but still recognizable as the place where our family had learned to prioritize medical needs over social obligations. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different from the beginning? Sophie asked as we paused outside the pediatric oncology unit where she had spent so many days as a patient. You mean if Mom and Dad had supported me during my surgery instead of going to Madison's wedding? Exactly. Do you think you still would have started the foundation? I considered the question carefully. I don't think so. I probably would have had a successful environmental consulting career and been grateful for my family's support during cancer treatment. But I wouldn't have understood the depth of need for surrogate family support during medical crises. So their betrayal was actually necessary for creating all the good that followed? Not necessary. That makes it sound predetermined. But their betrayal revealed a problem that needed solving, and my response to that betrayal created solutions that have helped thousands of people. Sophie nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that concept a lot in my work, how trauma can become the foundation for healing, both personal and collective. What conclusions have you reached? That pain isn't automatically transformative. It becomes transformative when people choose to use their difficult experiences to prevent others from facing similar difficulties. The key is the choice to serve rather than simply survive. Her insight perfectly captured the lesson our family had learned over decades of medical crises and relationship healing. As we prepared to leave the hospital, Sophie made an announcement that surprised me. Emma, I want to tell you something I've been considering for months. I've been accepted to a fellowship program that would take me to Uganda to help establish pediatric oncology services in East Africa. That's incredible, Sophie. Are you planning to accept? I want to, but it would mean 2 years away from the family stability protocol work here in the States. What does your heart tell you? That there are children in Uganda who need the same kind of medical care and family support that I received. If I can help establish those services, maybe hundreds of families will learn to support each other during medical crises instead of falling apart. Her decision to pursue international pediatric oncology work represented the next evolution of our family's commitment to transforming personal medical trauma into healing systems for others. 6 months later, I stood in the departure gate at Philadelphia International Airport, saying goodbye to Sophie as she left for Uganda. Her luggage was filled with family stability protocol materials that she planned to adapt for East African cultural contexts. I'll email you every week with updates, Sophie promised as we hugged goodbye. Focus on your work and your patients, I replied. But know that you're carrying forward everything our family learned about the importance of showing up for people during their most frightening moments. As I watched Sophie's plane taxi toward the runway, I reflected on the 40-year journey from my family choosing a wedding over my surgery, to my grandniece dedicating her medical career to supporting families during pediatric cancer treatment in one of the world's most underserved regions. The karma that had shaped our family's story had expanded far beyond anything I could have envisioned during those dark days following my surgery. The abandonment I had experienced had become the foundation for support systems that now served families on multiple continents. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of our journey was that it wasn't finished. Sophie's work in Uganda would undoubtedly create new insights about family support during medical crises, which would inform future innovations in pediatric care. The children she treated would grow up understanding the importance of family unity during health challenges, and they would pass those lessons on to their own children. The story that had begun with betrayal and abandonment had become a multi-generational commitment to ensuring that families stayed together during medical crises rather than falling apart. The wedding my parents had chosen over my surgery was a single day that ended decades ago, but the healing systems built from their abandonment would continue growing and evolving for generations to come. Standing in the airport, watching Sophie's plane disappear into the distance, I understood that the real measure of karma wasn't punishment or revenge. It was transformation and legacy. The most painful betrayals could become the foundation for the most meaningful contributions, but only when people chose to transform their trauma into service for others. Our family's journey proved that it's never too late to learn what really matters, that broken relationships can be rebuilt on foundations of hard-earned wisdom, and that the most powerful response to abandonment is creating systems of support that ensure others never face similar abandonment. The karma was complete, but the legacy would continue forever, expanding in ways we could never predict, but always in the direction of healing, support, and love, the values that truly matter when life becomes frightening and uncertain. In the end, that was the most meaningful inheritance any family could leave behind. The understanding that showing up for each other during crisis isn't just a moral obligation. It's the foundation of all healing, both medical and relational. The story was finished, but the work would continue, one family at a time, one patient at a time, one choice at a time, until everyone facing medical crisis could count on being surrounded by love, rather than abandoned in fear. Standing in the airport, watching Sophie's plane disappear into the distance, I understood that the real measure of karma wasn't punishment or revenge, it was transformation and legacy. The most painful betrayals could become the foundation for the most meaningful contributions, but only when people chose to transform their trauma into service for others. Our family's journey proved that it's never too late to learn what really matters, that broken relationships can be rebuilt on foundations of hard-earned wisdom, and that the most powerful response to abandonment is creating systems of support that ensure others never face similar abandonment. 40 years ago, my parents chose my sister's wedding over my cancer surgery. Today, their granddaughter was flying halfway around the world to ensure that no family would ever have to make such a choice again. Sometimes karma isn't about getting even, it's about making sure the pain stops with you. Sometimes the greatest revenge against those who abandon you is building a world where abandonment becomes impossible. The wedding was over decades ago, but the healing continues forever. Waibolo aso, the end.